Hello, friends. I am so excited for today's episode. You are in for the biggest treat, I hope. So we are going to be starting a new series called Conversations for Good. So as you know, this podcast is Get Organized for Good podcast. And when we say get organized for good, we mean not just once and for all. We mean for all the good that comes out of your life. So my right-hand woman is joining me for a new series called Conversations for Good, where you are going to get a behind-the-scenes look at life, friendship, business, and we really hope that these conversations are for good and that they help you. So I am so excited to introduce you to Briggs. Not only is she, like I said, my right-hand woman in the company, but she is also one of my dearest friends. And I have to say, one of my very favorite people in the entire world. So we hope that you are going to love this new series. And if you don't, let us know, because then we just won't do it anymore. So Briggs, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Corinne. So I feel the exact same way about you, Corinne. I mean, we've had so much fun over the many years. So I figure I'll kind of explain our relationship just a little bit from start to end.
Do it.
So Corinne and I met long ago, back in grad school. And she was one of the folks that I felt like I really wanted to get to know better, right? I mean, for obvious reasons, because you all know her well too. I wanted to get to know her better too. So I took her out to lunch. We went to Qdoba. We had a fantastic time. I think we fell in love with each other. And then from then on, we kept getting together, meeting up, and we've stayed friends since then. That was back in 2007, 2008. And throughout the years, Corinne has invited me to help her on many of her projects, which I take as a huge compliment, including a previous job. We worked together for 4 or 5 years, I think. And then when she was about to start Grid Glam, she talked with me about it. I was super interested in helping her. And it was at the same time that I was having my second child. So I was going to stop working. So the timing worked out really slick for me to kind of come on in whatever capacity that she needed me on as. And eventually that turned into the role as right-hand woman / COO / master of fun. I mean, whatever kind of title we want to give to me, we've had over the years.
So true. Yeah. Well, I was going to introduce you with your official title, which is COO of Grid Glam and head of HR. Those really are the official hats that you wear. And so, yeah, it was love at first sight, and it's just grown from there. So one thing that we thought would be really interesting to talk about is what it looks like to work in partnership with one of your really good friends and how that has translated into building trust, into having hard conversations, both work conversations and personal conversations. Fortunately for the both of us, we're very similar in very important ways and very different in very important ways, I think. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about what it's like working with your friend.
Yes. So when we first started, it was very clearly Corinne was in charge, right? And I was helping a few hours a month, I think, right? And then I remember you asked me to be your partner a few times, right? And I said, no, I just don't think so in terms of like an equal relationship, because you know so much more about organizing than I do. You are really good at making decisions. You know your own mind, and you like to be in charge. Am I right?
That's very true. I do like to be in charge. Yes.
Whereas I learned years and years ago, before I had even met you, that I actually prefer to be a number two. Like I like to be the implementer. I like to take guidance from others and sort of make it happen. I don't want to make the decisions. I want to let that be up to someone else. So I felt like the dynamic would be better if there was one person for whom the final decisions rested, right? Because I think what can be hard, just, out there generally in the world, is when there are two people equally in charge of something and they disagree. Now, what do? Do we play rock, paper, scissors? Like, how do we decide which way we're going to go with this, right? And then it can become a real issue at times. So I think it has worked out where in the times when we have disagreed, we defer to you, which I am always fine with, because that is the dynamic that I have helped to set up, right? And so then I feel like that has helped reduce the possible conflicts or other broader issues that could have come up. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever heard you say it in that way, but I do agree. And as you know, I coach a lot of entrepreneurs, some of whom are in partnership. And I think it absolutely can work when both people are in charge. When two people are in charge, it works best when there's very clearly defined purviews that people oversee. But I do think it's tricky. I think it, at the end of the day, reduces a lot of conflict, believe it or not, when there is one person in charge. But on the other hand, or sort of a corollary to that is, I highly value and respect your opinion. And there are areas where you have become the expert, and I do defer to you. So ultimately, if I really did disagree, it would be my decision. But I think through the years, there have been, and as we've grown the team, and most of the team, all the team reports directly into you, not into me. So you're in charge of managing other people, and in terms of making decisions about what they're going to do, that really does rest on you. So I think from my perspective, I also feel like I would hope that you feel empowered to really actually have quite a bit of control in the company, just not the final say.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally true. And I feel like that is partly why it works out so well, is that you do pull us all into the conversation, right? You want to have our opinions, you want to hear our perspective on things. And you can, even though you know you are in charge, which is a very stressful place to be, right? So you carry all of the weight and the burden of bringing us into the future. You're still willing to say like, oh, I'm wrong about that. Or I think you think about this better than I do, right? And having that humility, I think, is really important and very impressive, because you're very confident too, right? But then you're also willing to say, actually, I don't really know what I'm talking about with this. So I'm going to defer to you, or, take into account of everything that I say. And so I know I've changed your mind in the past too.
For sure.
But then I think also, even if you disagree, you might just go with what I'm saying because you're like, well, she just knows more about this than I do, which not everyone can do.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I think it's not just in a working relationship. I think it's a model for a very healthy interpersonal relationship. When you really respect someone and value their input, and when you know that you don't know everything, I think it makes it a much more satisfying relationship for both parties involved. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like our relationship that we've had through the years has also made me a better wife, because I feel like we get to sort of practice our interpersonal skills, work through any of our own stuff that's going on in our minds. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, I also really love and value and respect my husband. Maybe I could let him change my mind once in a while too. Maybe. It's a maybe, but I don't know if you feel that way at all with your husband.
Yeah, maybe one of these days you'll let him change your mind. No, I feel like, honestly, I would say that your advice to me has helped a lot in all sorts of things within my relationship with my husband, with my kids, with everything. You are very wise, which I know is like a cheesy thing to say, but it's true. I feel like you have such good feedback and advice. And so I think that has definitely impacted it. But I don't know if our conversations just about our relationship have impacted my relationship with my husband as much, but I could think about it more deeply.
Interesting. So let's switch gears a little bit, and it's always tough to relive hard conversations, but we've had a few. And I don't know if you feel this way. I feel like for the most part, in a good way for you, you tend to be the instigator of those conversations. I think you tend to be, I don't know if you feel that way. I think you tend to be very direct in that way, and be very good about bringing something to light that maybe I'm not even aware is festering. Do you feel like?
So that kind of ties back into what I was saying about in my introduction about how I'm like the COO, so I'm supporting you, is because I feel like in this role, my job is to often be your voice, right? I write a lot of the emails, I do a lot of the content, I put together a lot of the social media stuff. So I'm trying to be in your mind and trying to, what would Corinne say? What would Corinne do? And so because of that, I think that I often am just paying very close attention to you. And you and I both are either blessed or burdened with an incredible amount of empathy. And so I can feel how you're feeling based on the tone of your voice, right?
Yep.
So I can tell when you're not doing as well and when you are. And so, yeah, I mean, I think 99% of the time, it's great. We get along, everything's wonderful. But also, you've told me that if there is something that is bothering me about you, to tell you and to be direct about it. And I took that seriously, right? So instead of letting things fester or getting too upset about them, I tell you so that you know. But the other part of that that is really important is that you are willing to hear it, which it's hard. And I could do better at that too. So when someone comes to you and says, I'm upset by how you treated me, it's hard to be like, oh goodness, tell me more. I want to fix it, etc. Right? But you do that. So I think that is amazing and makes it much easier for me to come to say, what's going on and what's on my mind.
Yeah. It's also interesting to hear it reflected back. And I think, so for anyone who's listening to this, who has anxiety, wondering where you stand with people, one of the things you can do is to tell someone, if you're upset with me, if I've done something to upset you, if something doesn't sit right with you, tell me. And my feeling is, if you're not telling me, then my operating assumption has to be, we're good. Everything is good. So if I start spiraling, I can know that, oh, wait, if there was an issue, Briggs or whoever I might have said this to will tell me that there's an issue. And if there's nothing brought to my attention, then I don't need to worry. But the flip side of that is then when something is brought to me, I have to take it seriously and say, okay, wait, this is not an attack on me as a human being. This is feedback that I asked for. And I think, and you and I have talked about this, like in the depths of hard conversations we've had where we've been crying, is that I know, and I think we feel this about each other, that we love each other so much, we respect each other so much, and how each other feels is paramount to any money, to any business decisions, to anything else. Like we would throw the whole freaking company away for our friendship, but like deep, but truly, truly. And when you feel that someone really cares about you to that extent, then you hear what they're saying through the lens of like, this is not an attack. This person doesn't have ulterior motives. They want the best for me, for us, for everything. And and it's hard in those moments when you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm being attacked or criticized. But when you remember like, okay, wait a minute, we have the same goal here. It makes you be able to hear it so much better.
Yes, definitely. And I love that when you've said this to me before, and it's such a great point that I've never thought about before either, is consider the source, right? Who is this information coming from? And is that person open to, what I have to say and all those things? So I think that is really critically important to the conversation.
So you had mentioned this, the blessing and curse of empathy, and we are both highly empathetic people, which is amazing because we sort of have that like sixth sense of what's going on. But the downside of that is, if not just amongst each other, but if anyone in our company, if anyone that we're coaching, if any of our members, if we feel that they're unhappy or that they're sad or they're stressed, we feel that too. And that can be tough. And I would love if you would share the story that you shared with me about your mom. I mean, it feels like kind of random, but I think about that story all the time. People who can relate, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense.
Yes, completely. So I'll do a little context for the story and then I'll launch in. So just regarding the empathy piece, as you said, I feel like when you come into a tough conversation of any kind, you have to lead that with empathy, right? If you come into it with an attack of any kind without feeling like, what is she thinking first? It's not going to go as well, right? And so because you and I both have that intrinsic empathy, but then also can bring it out when we need to, I think it can make those conversations go really well. And so, but the downside, as you're saying, sort of the curse to having so much empathy is that you're not always paying attention to the things that you need to be paying attention to. So the story that you want me to relay about my mom. And my mom, I think, is just 100% empathy. Like that is her. She is incredible, an incredible woman in all different respects, but including this one. And I don't feel like society appreciates empathy as much as it should. So what happened? This was years ago, at least 5, 6 years ago. I was on the phone with my mom, and she had just gone to her granddaughter, my niece's softball game. And so I asked her, well, how did the game, what was the score? What was the score of the game? And she said, oh, I have no idea. And I said, oh, okay, that's fine. Okay, so, do you think they won? She's like, I don't know. Did, our niece, did my niece get a hit or a run or anything? Anything good or bad? She's like, I really, I'm not sure. Like, did you go to the game?
Were you there?
And she said, yeah, no, I was there. So I was thinking, okay, I need to give this woman a win. Like, what kind of question can she answer? I said, like, how did it go for you? What happened? And she said, well, your niece, my granddaughter, she looked really sad. Her face was sad. And I was trying to think about, when I noticed it, I thought, did it just begin, or was this still a sad face before she had this conversation with her friend? Because I know this friend of hers can sometimes hurt her feelings. So I thought, is it about the friend, or is this just, did she come to this game with that sad face and the feelings? So I was trying to catch her face as often as I could, but they're wearing hats and helmets, and it was hard for me to do. And I was focused so much on that the entire time that I have no idea what the score is. I don't know who won. I don't know if she did anything good or bad. I don't know, because I was just so obsessed with how she was feeling that day. And you don't even think about it. And I think that's the thing that's tricky, is that you don't even think about it. And it impacts, of course, everything in your experience, but also impacts your memory. So it seems to society that my mom doesn't know anything. She can't remember anything, right? She says, no, doesn't know time, whatever. But that's not the case. She's thinking about the things that really matter. But that's not what society asks. No one's going to come, oh, you went to the softball game. What was the facial expression of your granddaughter? Did it look like she was doing, right? You don't ask that question. So then it just comes across in this way. And just relatedly, I have had the same experience with high school friends whom I also love dearly. And they'll bring up a memory from high school, and I'll be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I was probably there. Like, you were definitely there. I'm like, listen, I completely believe you. This is not like I don't trust you. I totally believe that I was there. I have no memory of it. I wish I did, but I was probably thinking about some conversation I had with my boyfriend, and he said this to me, and he looked this way, and what did that mean? And all the things.
I mean, it's making me teary-eyed again, hearing the story for a couple reasons. One is because it's so nice that you recognize that in your mother, because how many times do you have a conversation with someone and they don't remember the details and you thought it's because they weren't paying attention, but it's actually because they weren't paying attention to those details, but they were paying attention to how you were feeling and what was going on with you, right? So often we discount other people. And for those of us personally that experience it, how often do you sort of beat yourself up over like, why can't I just be in the moment? Or why am I thinking about these things? Or why am I like anxious about this? But it's not that at all. You're just so in tune to what everyone else is feeling that it's almost a distraction from what you feel like you're supposed to be paying attention to. And like you're saying that society doesn't value it. I think we also don't value it in ourselves. And that's really hard.
Yeah, it really is. It's true. It's true. So I think we need to just change society and try to focus on the importance of empathy. Because I think ambition is very highly regarded. Everyone knows who's the most ambitious, and you're so proud of them, and that's wonderful. But who's the most empathic?
Right.
No one, no one gets any awards for that.
It's so true. And in some ways, you and I are we pay very close attention to detail, right? Like, we are meticulous in some ways, and in other ways, just not at all. And there's kind of no rhyme or reason to it. And we were trying to come up for an explanation for it. And then when Briggs told me the story, I'm like, oh my God, that's it. It's because our head is full of so many other things. And I think one of the funniest examples is whenever Briggs and I have a Zoom meeting, just the two of us, somehow we always end up in different Zoom rooms. Like, we can never end up in the same Zoom room together. And it's like, we're very organized. We will be on time, if not a minute early, just never in the same place.
Exactly. Who needs that detail though? I mean, there's more important things going on. But tied to that too is that we're so often deferring to our teammates, right? Like, can you remember what this is? I don't know what that, can you remember? How did we do this 3 years ago? Do you have any idea? And usually they do, which is great because you and I cannot be relied upon.
It's so true. And we should probably talk in a future episode that's more business related on how we actually capture some of these things now that we've realized this about ourselves. And we can talk about our task management system and all the other things. So one final thing I sort of want to leave everyone on is let's talk about the boundary we've put in place, like the logistical boundary around when we're going to communicate something personal versus something work related. So we, for the most part, communicate in a walkie-talkie app called Voxer. And we do it for work, but we've also really gotten in the habit of just communicating personally that way too, because it's so easy and it's easier than sending a text, and you don't have to call someone and make sure you're going to get them on the phone. Like we can just talk. So we have what I feel like is a fun system for when we get a message from each other, making sure we know whether it's work related or personal related. And it sounds so simple, but I feel like for us, it sort of helps us keep that boundary. So do you want to share about that?
Yeah, I think that's good. So I think for a while we were trying to keep more personal stuff to text, but just not as much fun because you're just writing it out. And then you're actually, because we're old people, we're actually doing voice memo or voice to text. So you're just talking and then it words, and then you have to respell things because you can't send a text with misspellings in them. That would be crazy.
Right. And we have to go put a punctuation mark in because since we're old, we're not going to send a text that doesn't have proper punctuation marks. So it was a whole thing.
Right. So it's better to just say it. Right. So instead, but the way that Voxer works is that you can have a voicemail going, but you have no idea what it's inside of it. So instead, we will sort of put a heading to it in writing. So you can also write it and say, this is personal, arrow down. And then you can talk for 10 to 12 minutes, depending on the topic of conversation. And I think that this is not fully true, but at least we try to do this as best we can. Like during the working hours, we're talking more about work. Every once in a while, a personal thing will come in. But again, back to the empathy, I will only do that if I can tell that you're having a good day and feeling relaxed. Then I'll throw in some, oh, this funny thing happened. My kids were so funny. They did this, whatever. But otherwise, I just kind of let you do your day because you have a lot on your plate. Every day is pretty booked. And I don't want to intrude with you feeling the angst of having to respond appropriately depending on what I wrote about, right? So I try to kind of let that go until after hours, and then we can share a little bit more of our personal lives. But I would also say that since we talk constantly, we don't share that much personal stuff anymore. I feel like we both have to make a conscious effort to remember, like, oh yeah, she's my friend. Maybe I should share this interesting thing with her that just happened today, right? Just because there's so much work stuff going on. Do you think that's true? Or
yeah, although I feel like I wonder if you might more consider it more work and I might consider it more personal, although I guess it's so connected. I will Vox you a lot about my thought process on things, like how I'm thinking about something or how I'm feeling. And it is often work related, but it feels very personal to me. So that might be something you bucket as work and I bucket as personal because in essence, like I am the business. So how I'm thinking is the business, but it's also my life. So
yeah, no, I think that's totally true. And I feel like that's why we don't have to go into my daughter did this today, which is very clearly personal and not tied to work stuff, is because our work is our lives in so many ways. Not just because it takes up so much of our time and it's such a work of the heart, right? And we're trying always trying our best at this task that we put together for ourselves. But I also just think that because it's home organizing, which is a huge part of both of our lives on a daily basis, right? Working with your family to get everything tidy, to get ready for the weekday, to do the Sunday right, reset implementation correctly, all that kind of thing. I feel like it all is very intermixed.
Yeah. Do you see what she did there, friends? She's always telling me I need to bring these episodes back to organizing when I want to go on tangent. And she just masterfully made this about organizing. See how good she is? Now you got to see it. And you didn't even realize you were doing that, did you? Or did you?
No.
So that was good. That was very masterful. But yeah, no, I think that's all true. And so for anyone who is trying to navigate this, a working friendship relationship, I think on the one hand, it's much easier for us than probably for many because we have worked together in multiple settings. We went to grad school together. And we're both, despite how unprofessional we actually are both relatively professional because we do have corporate backgrounds where we've worked in like big organizations in the past. And we do bring that, I think, in a good way to the work that we do at Grid Glam, even though we are so casual. But I think the other piece of it is we're not scared to have hard conversations. And we have like crying conversations and we've heard each other's feelings before. And we know that that's not an end point. That is just a beginning point of then a bigger conversation that is going to leave us better afterwards. So back to the organizing comment you made, Briggs and I were brainstorming all of the things that we thought would be interesting for you to hear about. And I also polled my Instagram audience. And I think one of the really interesting things about us is our different relationship to organizing and what it's looked like for you through the years since we started this company, what it's looked like for me. So we are going to talk about that in future episodes. We're going to talk about raising our kids and parenting. We're going to talk about the things that we've learned from each other. And we also want to hear from you. So if you loved this episode, obviously, if you loved it, then rate it 5 stars and subscribe, but shoot me a DM and let me know. If you didn't love this episode, don't rate it. Just come to my DM and tell me why you didn't love it and what you'd like to see instead. So, Briggs, any parting words for our listeners?
No, I don't think so. This was so much fun. I hope that you enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll be back on again very soon.
Bye, friends. We'll see you next time.